Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Foundations. Garrett Voss had built his life like he built his structures methodically with precision and designed to last forever. At 35, he owned Voss Construction, a company that had risen from a single truck operation to one of the most respected building firms in Denver. His hands, scarred from years of honest work, could frame a house or draft blueprints with equal skill. Those same hands had held his daughter Lucy the day she was born and had built the swing set in their backyard where she spent countless hours laughing. Tessa had been different back then. When they met 12 years ago, she was a struggling art student with paint under her fingernails and dreams bigger than her bank account. Garrett had fallen for her passion, her creativity, the way she could see beauty in abandoned buildings that others wanted to tear down. She convinced him to restore their first home instead of building new. And he'd watched her transform a decrepit Victorian into something magnificent. But success had changed her. As Garrett's business grew and Tessa transitioned into real estate, using her eye for design to stage million-dollar homes, she began surrounding herself with a different crowd. Her sister Valerie had married into old Denver money. And through Valerie's connections, Tessa started running with people who measured worth by designer labels and trust funds rather than hard work and integrity. The change had been gradual, like erosion wearing away at a foundation. First, it was complaints about Garrett's callous hands at dinner parties. Then came suggestions that he should hire managers and elevate his brand instead of still swinging hammers on job sites. The final crack had appeared 6 months ago when she'd started spending 3 evenings a week at an upscale gym, claiming she needed to network with potential clients. Garrett had suspected nothing initially. He trusted his wife, believed in their marriage, and was focused on the biggest project of his career, a luxury residential complex that would cement his company's reputation. He worked 16-hour days, often sleeping at the construction trailer, while Tessa maintained their social calendar and cared for 8-year-old Lucy. Lucy was the light of both their worlds. Or so Garrett had believed. She had inherited Tessa's artistic eye and Garrett's practical mind, creating elaborate chalk masterpieces on their driveway and explaining to anyone who'd listened how her daddy's building stood up against earthquakes. She was precocious, observant, and had an unsettling ability to notice things adults tried to hide. The first real warning sign had come 3 weeks ago. Lucy had asked during dinner why Mommy's friend Blake came to the house when Daddy was at work. Tessa had laughed it off, explaining that Blake was a trainer who sometimes helped her prepare marketing materials for luxury properties near his gym. Garrett had accepted the explanation, too, and too trusting to probe deeper. But Lucy's questions had planted a seed of unease. Garrett began noticing small things. Tessa's phone always face down on surfaces, her sudden interest in late-night property showings, the way she'd started dressing more provocatively for her evening workouts. Still, he'd pushed down his suspicions, telling himself that 12 years of marriage and 8 years of raising Lucy together meant something. The construction business had taught Garrett patience. You didn't rush a foundation or cut corners on structural integrity. You planned, you measured twice, you built to last. He'd applied the same philosophy to his marriage, assuming that solid foundations would weather any storm. He was about to learn how catastrophically wrong he'd been. Chapter 2. Cracks in the foundation. The call came at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that had started like any other. Garrett was reviewing blueprints for the complex's final phase when his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Voss, this is Denver General Hospital. Your daughter Lucy has been brought to our emergency department. You need to come immediately. The blueprints scattered as Garrett knocked over his chair, his mind struggling to process the words. What happened? Is she okay? There's been an accident, sir. Please come as quickly as you can. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of worst-case scenarios. Garrett's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles went white, his mind racing between prayers and curses. He'd left 3 voicemails for Tessa, each more desperate than the last, but she hadn't answered. The emergency room was a chaos of sounds and smells that assaulted his senses. A young doctor with tired eyes found him at the information desk. Mr. Voss, I'm Dr. Rodriguez. Your daughter fell down the stairs at your home. She has a severe concussion and some internal bleeding. We've moved her to the ICU and are monitoring her closely. Fell down the stairs. Garrett's mind reeled. Their house was a single story. The only stairs were the ones leading to the basement and Lucy knew she wasn't allowed down there without permission. The paramedics said, your wife called 911. She was quite distressed, understandably. She rode in the ambulance with Lucy, but stepped out to make some phone calls. She should be back shortly. Garrett found Lucy in a room that smelled of antiseptic and fear. His vibrant, chattering daughter lay motionless, dwarfed by machines that beeped and hummed around her. Her face was pale except for a dark bruise across her left temple. And seeing her like this unleashed something primal in Gareth's chest. He pulled a chair next to her bed and took her small hand in his callous one, whispering promises he wasn't sure he could keep. "Daddy's here, sweetheart. You're going to be okay. I'm not going anywhere." Tessa arrived 30 minutes later, her makeup smudged and her hair disheveled. She wore her workout clothes, expensive athleisure that cost more than most people made in a week, and seemed genuinely distraught. "Oh God, Gareth, I'm so sorry," she said, collapsing into the chair on Lucy's other side. "I was in the kitchen when I heard the crash. She must have been playing near the basement door. I should have been watching her more carefully." Something in her tone felt rehearsed, but Gareth was too consumed with worry to analyze it deeply. They sat in tense silence for an hour, taking turns holding Lucy's hand and speaking to the doctors who came and went with updates. Then Tessa's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and something shifted in her expression. "I have to go," she said suddenly, standing up. Gareth looked at her in disbelief. "What do you mean you have to go? Our daughter is in intensive care. It's Valerie. She's having her anniversary party tonight and she's having a complete meltdown about the catering. I'm the only one who can handle the vendors." "Tessa, are you out of your mind?" Lucy could. Gareth couldn't even finish the sentence. "She's stable. The doctor said so, and there's nothing we can do but wait. I'll be back in a few hours." Gareth stood up slowly, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Please don't leave us. Not now." Tessa's face hardened in a way he'd never seen before. "If I'm not there, Valerie's friends will think I don't care about family obligations. These people are important clients, Gareth. You wouldn't understand the social dynamics. I understand that our daughter is fighting for her life. You're being dramatic." She fell down some stairs. Kids recover from this stuff all the time. Tessa grabbed her purse and walked toward the door. "I'll be back later tonight." As her footsteps disappeared down the hallway, Gareth felt something fundamental break inside him. Not just his heart, but his entire understanding of the woman he'd married. He sat back down next to Lucy, his hand trembling as he stroked her hair. "I'm here, baby girl," he whispered. "Daddy's not going anywhere." The hours crawled by. Gareth dozed fitfully in the uncomfortable chair, jerking awake every time a machine beeped or a nurse entered the room. Around midnight, Lucy's fingers twitched in his hand. "Lucy, sweetheart, can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. She tried to speak, but could only manage a whisper. "Daddy, I'm here, baby. You're safe now." Lucy's eyes found his. And in them he saw not just confusion but fear. "Daddy, Mommy pushed me because..." Her voice trailed off as exhaustion claimed her again. But those 6 words detonated in Gareth's mind like explosives in a controlled demolition. Everything he built his life on, trust, love, family, came crashing down in those few seconds. "Mommy pushed me because..." Because of what? And why would his wife, the mother of his child, do such a thing? As Lucy slipped back into unconsciousness, Gareth felt a cold clarity settle over him. The construction business had taught him to recognize structural failures before they cause catastrophic collapse. His marriage hadn't just cracked, it had been deliberately sabotaged, and he was going to find out exactly why. Chapter 3. The Blueprint of Betrayal. Lucy remained unconscious for another 18 hours, during which Tessa returned only twice. Once briefly in the morning with coffee and excuses about handling Valerie's crisis, and again that evening with more elaborate explanations about social obligations. Each time she seemed increasingly agitated when Gareth pressed for details about the accident. "Why was Lucy near the basement stairs?" he asked during her second visit. "You know she's not allowed down there." "I don't know, Gareth. Kids do stupid things. Maybe she was looking for something." "Looking for what?" "We keep nothing down there but storage and my old tools." Tommy was expensive but thorough, and more importantly, he understood that some clients needed results that could withstand legal scrutiny. "I need complete surveillance on 2 individuals, Gareth told him. "Video, audio, if you can get it, financial records, communication records, the works, and I needed to be admissible in court. Divorce case, among other things. There's also the matter of child endangerment and assault." Tommy's tone sharpened. "How much danger are we talking about?" Gareth told him about Lucy's injuries and her account of what happened. By the end of the story, Tommy's professional demeanor had shifted to something more personal. "About a daughter, too," Tommy said quietly. "This Blake character, he was there when it happened." "According to Lucy, yes. And apparently prepared to help silence her." "Then he's not just an affair partner, he's an accessory to child abuse. That changes the game entirely." While Tommy began his professional surveillance, Garrett decided to take a more direct approach with Blake. He started working out at Elevate Fitness, timing his visits to observe Blake's interactions with clients. What he saw disgusted him. Blake was smooth, charismatic, and utterly predatory. He focused his attention on women who seemed unhappy or neglected, offering them not just fitness training, but emotional support and validation. Garrett watched him work his charm on a recent divorce. Say, a woman whose husband traveled frequently for business, and most sickeningly, a young mother who complained about feeling unappreciated at home. But Blake's greatest talent was making each woman feel like she was his only special client. He had an uncanny ability to identify their vulnerabilities and exploit them with surgical precision. Garrett began to understand how Tessa had fallen into his trap. After a week of observation, Garrett arranged to be Blake's client. "I'm getting back into shape after spending too much time behind a desk," he told Blake during their first session. "My wife suggested this place. She's been coming here for months and can't stop talking about the results." Blake's smile faltered almost imperceptibly when Garrett mentioned Tessa, but he recovered quickly. "That's great, man. What's your wife's name? I probably know her." "Tessa Voss. Pretty woman real estate agent. Always talks about her sister's social events." "Oh, yeah. Tessa is awesome. Super dedicated to her fitness goals." "You're a lucky guy." Garrett smiled back with equal insincerity. "I definitely am. We've been married 12 years and I still can't believe she chose a guy like me. Sometimes I wonder what I'd do if I ever lost her." Over the following sessions, Garrett played the role of the oblivious husband perfectly. He complained about working long hours, mentioned his upcoming business trips, and even asked Blake for advice about surprising Tessa with romantic gestures. Blake's responses revealed everything Garrett needed to know. The man had no conscience, no guilt about breaking up a family. In fact, he seemed to enjoy the power dynamic of sleeping with a client's wife while training the husband. But Garrett was gathering more than just information. He was studying his enemy, learning his routines, his weaknesses, his pressure points. Blake was vain, materialistic, and desperately insecure beneath his polished exterior. He needed constant validation and lived beyond his means to maintain an image of success. Most importantly, Blake had no idea he was being hunted. On Friday evening, Tommy called with an update that made Garrett's blood run cold. "I've got them on video," Tommy said. "Your house, your bed, your daughter's accident, all of it." "But Garrett, there's something else. Something that changes everything." "What?" "Blake Morrison isn't just some dirtbag trainer. He's done this before multiple times. And one of his previous targets, her kid, ended up in the hospital, too. Different city, different story, but the same pattern. I think your wife and daughter stumbled into something much more dangerous than a simple affair." Chapter 5. The Trap. Tommy's evidence painted a picture that made Garrett's vision blur with rage. Blake Morrison had a history of targeting married women with children, systematically isolating them from their families while bleeding them financially. In Phoenix, a 10-year-old boy had been hospitalized with mysterious injuries after catching Blake with his mother. The case had been quietly settled out of court, with the father accepting a substantial payout to keep the details private. "He's not just a predator," Tommy explained as they reviewed the files in his office. "He's escalating. Each time the violence gets worse. Your daughter was lucky." Garrett studied the photographs and documents spread across Tommy's desk. "What happened to the other families?" "Destroyed. The Phoenix case ended in divorce. The mother lost custody of her son and had a nervous breakdown within 6 months. Blake moved here right after that settlement. And Tessa doesn't know about his history. No way. He's too smart for that. He presents himself as a young, struggling trainer who's just looking for love. By the time they figure out what he really is, they're too compromised to back out." But there was more. Tommy had tracked Blake's finances and discovered a pattern that revealed the true scope of his operation. He's not just getting gifts from these women. He's blackmailing them. "Look at these bank deposits." The financial records showed regular payments from multiple sources over the past 2 years. Patricia Henley, the divorce client Miguel had mentioned, was still making monthly transfers to Blake's account 6 months after her divorce was finalized. "He records them," Tommy continued. "Audio, video, probably photos, too. Then he uses it to keep them paying long after the relationship's end." Garrett felt something savage awakening in his chest. Blake wasn't just destroying his marriage. He was systematically terrorizing women and children for profit. And Tessa, despite being a victim herself, had chosen to protect him over their daughter. "What about the recordings of my wife?" Tommy hesitated. "You sure you want to see them?" "I need to see everything." The video quality was surprisingly clear. Blake had hidden cameras throughout his apartment, capturing every detail of his encounters with various women. The footage of Tessa was devastating. Not just because of the betrayal, but because it showed how completely Blake had manipulated her. In the earliest recordings from 4 months ago, Tessa had been hesitant, guilty, constantly mentioning Garrett and Lucy. But Blake had systematically broken down her resistance, convincing her that her marriage was holding her back, that she deserved better than a blue-collar husband who couldn't appreciate her sophistication. The most damning footage was from the day of Lucy's accident. The basement camera had captured everything. Blake pressuring Tessa to leave Garrett. Tessa's panic when Lucy discovered them. And the horrifying moment when Blake had suggested taking care of the kid problem permanently. She's going to keep talking. Blake had said on the recording, kids don't understand the importance of keeping secrets. Maybe she needs to learn a harder lesson. It was in that Tessa had grabbed Lucy and dragged her upstairs where the assault had occurred out of camera range. But the audio was clear enough. Lucy's cries, Tessa's shouted threats, and a sickening thud when their daughter's head hit the door frame. Garrett watched it all, his face carved from stone. When the footage ended, he was quiet for a long moment. "I want copies of everything," he finally said. "And Tommy, I need you to do one more thing. I need you to find out exactly how Blake gets his victims to pay him. And I need contact information for every woman he's blackmailed." "What are you planning?" "I'm going to give him the biggest score of his career and then I'm going to take everything away from him. His money, his freedom, his ability to hurt anyone else." That weekend, Garrett put the first phase of his plan into action. He took Tessa out for an expensive dinner at her favorite restaurant, playing the role of the loving husband trying to reconnect after their trauma. "I've been thinking about what you said," he told her over wine that costs more than most people made in a day. "Maybe Lucy would benefit from spending time with your mother. The change of scenery could help her process." "What happened?" Tessa's relief was palpable. "Really? You'd be okay with that? I want what's best for our daughter. And honestly, maybe we need some time to reconnect as a couple. This whole experience has made me realize how much I've been taking you for granted." He played his role perfectly, expressing guilt about working too much, promising to pay more attention to her needs, even suggesting they plan a romantic getaway once Lucy was settled in Arizona. Tessa bought every word. By the end of the evening, she was more affectionate than she'd been in months, talking excitedly about their future and how this crisis had ultimately brought them closer together. What she didn't know was that Garrett had already spoken to her mother, explaining the real situation and ensuring that Lucy would be safe and loved while he handled the situation at home. Eleanor Winters had been horrified by her daughter's actions and immediately agreed to take Lucy for as long as necessary. "That girl was raised better than this," Eleanor had said angrily. "I don't know what's gotten into her, but you handle it however you see fit, Garrett. Lucy will be safe with me." The second phase involved Blake himself. During their next training session, Garrett carefully planted seeds of an opportunity too good to resist. "You know, I've been thinking about diversifying my investments," Garrett mentioned as Blake spotted him on the bench press. "Real estate has been good to me, but I'm looking at some private equity." Blake's legs seemed to give out and he sat down heavily on a nearby bench. "What do you want?" "I want you to disappear tonight. You're going to return every penny you've stolen from those women. You're going to provide them with copies of everything you used to blackmail them so they can finally feel safe. And then you're going to leave Denver and never come back." "I can't. The money. I don't have it all anymore." "Yes, you do. You've been collecting it all week for my fake investment. 60,000 should be enough to cover what you owe Patricia and the others. Consider the rest a penalty fee." Blake's breathing was shallow and rapid. "And Tessa is my problem to handle. But Blake, if you ever contact her again, if you ever come near my family again, if I ever hear that you've tried this operation in another city with another family," Garrett leaned down until his face was inches from Blake's. "I will find you. I will destroy you, and next time I won't be nearly so generous with your options." Blake nodded frantically. Okay, I'll do whatever you want. Just don't call the police. The police are the least of your concerns right now because Blake, there's something else you need to understand. I'm not just some cuckold husband looking for revenge. I'm a man whose child was hurt, whose family was threatened. And men like me, we don't forgive. We don't forget. And we sure as hell don't let threats to our children walk away unpunished." Garrett straightened up and gathered his gym bag. "Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., I'll text you the address. Don't be late, and don't even think about running because if you do, I'll make sure every woman in America knows exactly what Blake Morrison looks like and what he does to families." As Garrett walked away, he could hear Blake's ragged breathing. Behind him, the man was finally understanding the true scope of what he'd gotten himself into. He thought he was dealing with another oblivious husband, another easy mark. Instead, he'd awakened something in Garrett that was infinitely more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. That evening, Garrett had dinner with Tessa and Lucy, who was being discharged from the hospital the next day. Lucy was excited about visiting her grandmother, chattering about all the things they were going to do together. Tessa seemed relaxed and happy, completely unaware that her world was about to implode.